This just in, guys, a Fulton County judge has just squashed 6 counts in the Georgia election interference case against former President Donald Trump and his 18 defendants. So Judge Scott McAfee said in an order just a few days ago that the state failed to allege sufficient detail for 6 counts of solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. Now, I like what he said here. He said the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is, in the undersigned opinion, fatal. Fatal, you guys. That's how he described the legal charges against Trump. Now, if that were not a sign, I don't know what is. Trump attorney Steve Sadow, he agreed, and he said that the ruling is a correct application of the law as the prosecution failed to make specific allegations of any alleged wrongdoing on those accounts. He then added what many Trump supporters have been saying, that the entire prosecution of President Trump is political, constitutes election interference, and should be dismissed. Judge McAfee recently said some words about the Trump case and the DA Fani Willis disqualification decision, and he rarely talks about cases he has going on. Now, what McAfee said was he was looking forward to telling his children in the future that he played it straight and that he did the best that he could. And so now the ruling could mean he's leaning a certain way about the case. He's saying that he's set to deliver his decision in the next couple of days, so we'll see where things go. Now, in the bigger scheme of things, we're also going to be answering the question, is Trump exempt from criminal charges? Because our former President Donald Trump just asked a New York State court to pause his criminal trial for charges stemming from hush money payments made during his presidential campaign. His reason? His presidential immunity would prevent some evidence from being used at trial. So Trump claims immunity in all 4 of the criminal cases against him, and the Supreme Court will soon decide if he actually does. Really, the legal question is whether Trump has presidential immunity has made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, which announced just recently that it would begin to hear the case the week of April 22nd. The announcement was already seen by many experts as a victory for the Trump team in and of itself, as the federal election interference trial cannot begin until the Supreme Court weighs in. In other words, perhaps the biggest case against Trump has been pushed back by months. So yeah, a whole lot of wins for Trump in this one. Don't go away, guys. We're getting right into it. So here's the news as it came in. Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee, the same judge presiding over the Fani Willis disqualification case, has decided to drop 6 counts in the Georgia election interference case against former President Donald Trump and his 18 co-defendants. Now, 3 of the counts dismissed issued by Fani Willis were against Trump himself. Check this out.
What is happening is that Judge Scott McAfee is dismissing several of the charges here in Georgia against former President Donald Trump. 6 of the charges in this order. The charges so far, and I'm still making my way through the judge's ruling right now, but appear to do with solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. Those were certainly some of the charges that he was facing. Other people that were named, of course, Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Johnny Eastman, Mark Meadows. And so this is certainly notable because the former president was facing a number of charges, but to have 6 of them removed is notable. Now, it's important to note he's still facing charges here in Georgia, still facing charges in Fulton County. We're also still waiting on a major decision from Judge Scott McAfee as to whether or not Fani Willis can continue to remain prosecutor on this case.
My prediction, salt levels from anti-Trump politicians are going to hit 9,000 on this one. You know what I mean? Because seriously, this is a win for Trump and the American people can't get enough of it in the news. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the detail because it was pretty interesting what Scott McAfee actually said here, especially considering how this may actually be him cluing us in on what he's leaning with that DA Fani Willis disqualification decision. So about the charges dropped. So McAfee said that the state, meaning Fani Willis's team, failed to allege sufficient detail for 6 counts of solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer. And more importantly, he said that the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is, in the undersigned opinion, fatal. What's missing were, according to this, sufficient detail regarding the nature of the commission, the underlying felony solicited. So they do not give the defendants enough information to prepare their defenses intelligently, as the defendants could have violated the constitutions and thus the statutes in dozens, if not hundreds, of distinct ways. According to Georgia state law, it's against the rules for any public official to knowingly break their oath as outlined by law. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has accused Trump and 6 others of trying to persuade several state state officials to violate their oaths in an attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. The indictment specifically mentions alleged attempts to convince members of the Georgia legislature to unlawfully appoint alternative presidential electors, as well as efforts by Trump and his then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to persuade Georgia Secretary of State Brad Rossbringer to invalidate the election results. Now, some of the defendants have contested the charges, arguing that Willis did not detail the exact terms of the oath that were alleged to have been violated. Additionally, McAfee argued that the indictment should have included allegations of an underlying felony solicited by the defendants. The judge wrote that a naked charge of solicitation cannot survive unless accompanied by additional elements establishing the solicited felony. So definitely looks like Fani Willis dropped the ball on that one, which amounts to a big win for Trump. Now, when asked about it, Fani Willis did not immediately respond for a request for comment. But according to Trump's lawyer, Steve Sadow, the court made the correct legal decision and that the ruling is a correct application of the law, as the prosecution failed to make specific allegations of any alleged wrongdoing on these counts. He also reiterated how the entire prosecution of President Trump is political, constitutes election interference, and should be dismissed. Now, McAfee commented on this Georgia case against Trump recently. He said how he's looking forward to looking his kids in the eye when they're all grown up and telling them that he played it straight and he did the best that he could. And these counts dropped against Trump certainly are an indication of the judge playing it straight, don't you think? Like I've heard some people say, this is a great day in America. And you know, a lot of people stand with the former president. It's Trump 2024 all the way for many Americans. Don't you think so, guys? Like this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support for the content that we do. Let me tell you guys, it is hard to do the research for this, especially when mainstream media does its very best to bury the truth in all their noise. You know what I'm saying, guys? So I just want to thank you so much for sharing this video on Facebook and Twitter. It really helps to get the message out there. So the question remains, is Trump exempt from criminal charges? That's what he's claiming in a recent appeal to pause the criminal trial for charges stemming from hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels during his presidential campaign. So according to Trump, his presidential immunity would prevent some evidence from being used at trial. This is part and parcel to the presidential immunity that he's claiming in all 4 of the criminal cases against him. And the Supreme Court will decide if he actually does. The Supreme Court will hear arguments in April over whether ex-presidents can be criminally prosecuted for conduct that's alleged to be a part of their official duties, as Trump has tried to have the federal case against him for trying to overturn the 2020 election dropped, arguing that he's immune since his actions challenging the results were undertaken while he was in the White House. Trump asked the New York court overseeing this hush money case with Stormy Daniels to pause the trial until the Supreme Court rules, because prosecutors could introduce statements that he made in 2018 as a part of the trial showing his alleged pressure campaign on ex-attorney Michael Cohen, who made the hush money payments, which Trump argued could be covered by presidential immunity. In addition to the federal election and the hush money cases, Trump has also argued that his state charges in Georgia, the one we're talking about a while ago, they should be dropped because he has immunity, as well as his federal charges over allegedly mishandling classified documents, as he argues he decided to designate the records that he brought back to Mar-a-Lago as personal while still in office. Now, just for a little bit of context here, the DOJ has long held that presidents cannot be criminally indicted while in office, arguing in a memo that it would impermissibly undermine the capacity of the executive branch, and the Supreme Court ruled in Nixon versus Fitzgerald that presidents can't be held liable in civil cases for actions they undertook as a part of their official duties. Whether ex-presidents can face criminal charges for actions they took in the office while in the White House is still unsettled. However, and this will be the first time that the Supreme Court has weighed in on this particular issue, but some are saying that this decision to decide, it's already a win in and of itself for the former president. See, by the legal question making its way all the way to the Supreme Court, the federal election interference trial can't begin until the Supreme Court weighs in. In other words, perhaps the biggest case against Trump has already been pushed back by months. The Supreme Court pushed back the case's arguments to begin April 25th. Putting the case on almost the last day of the week suggests another lengthy delay to ultimately decide it. So the simple fact that the court is hearing the case at all could delay Trump's January 6th case until after the election, giving him the benefit of voters not seeing him as a convicted felon on their ballots. And remember, guys, these are back-to-back legal wins, as Trump is still enjoying a victory from the Supreme Court ruling that Colorado, as well as other states, can't enforce the Constitution's disqualification clause against federal office holders and remove him from their ballots. Some even consider this a guarantee for a Trump 2024 win in November. I definitely know a lot of people that will only vote for Donald J. Trump in 2024. Most of them, it's their third vote cast for what they call the real president. And this presidential immunity case would really be the game changer, as all of the other cases would likely fall like dominoes if this were decided in Trump's favor. For one, Trump is asking the New York court to delay the criminal case on charges stemming from hush money paid to a porn star, at least until the U.S. Supreme Court finishes reviewing his claim for presidential immunity in a separate case. The case is one of 4 federal and state criminal indictments the presumptive Republican presidential nominee faces. Firm trial dates have not yet been set in the other 3 cases, which stem from his efforts to reverse his 2020 loss to Democratic President Joe Biden and his handling of government documents. One of them, though, has a pretty important decision coming up. Now, of course, I'm talking about the Georgia election interference case against Donald Trump and 14 defendants. I mentioned earlier how 6 counts were recently dismissed, but another decision coming up on this case is whether DA Fani Willis should be removed from the case due to her relationship with former prosecutor Nathan Wade, something that could mean a very serious conflict of interest in the case and may have even led to the dismissal of the whole thing. So the presidential judge, Scott McAfee, says he's on track to order this week on whether or not to disqualify Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. He says that he feels like he's on track to having that done by the deadline that he put on himself, which was at least 2 weeks. So really, what really caught my attention here about how McAfee, who doesn't usually talk about this case with the press, he mentioned how he's looking forward to talking to his kids about it when they're all grown up. He shared this earlier, but it kind of bears repeating. McAfee said that he's looking forward to looking them in the eye and telling them that he played it straight and that he did the best that he could. Now, whether those counts against Trump are an indicator of the direction that he's leaning in this decision, we'll make sure to share those first with you guys. But just make sure you're subscribed to the channel, have the notification bell so that you don't miss out on the next episode. As always, I'm keeping a lookout for the latest news to share with you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all on the next one.